connect your headphones. This is Sunny Audios. Hey, before this audio officially begins, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps on the channel. And join my Patreon. The link's in the description. Enjoy! The beginning. The meeting of Kronos, Dracon, and Peony in the dense, ancient woodlands was not the result of fate alone, but rather a series of circumstances that had nudged them onto the same path. Kronos, the 11 Ranger, had been traveling these woods for days, his journey driven by a quiet purpose known only to him. The forest with its secrets and silent whispers had always been his refuge, a place where he could move unnoticed and unfettered. But this time, his travels were different. He had sensed something, a disturbance in the balance of the natural world, a shift that had drawn him out of his solitude and onto the trails that led towards the small kingdom of Lockhaven. He was no stranger to the signs that the world offered to those who knew how to look, and it was these signs that had brought him to the clearing at just the right moment. Dracon, the dragon-born warrior, had been on the road for reasons that were as much about proving his strength as they were about seeking something more. His journey had been one of challenges, each town or outpost a stepping stone where he could rest his might against the best they had to offer. Tales of Lockhaven's formidable campaign Valen had reached his ears, and with them a challenge he could not resist. The woods were merely the final stretch before he reached the kingdom, a minor obstacle on his way to another victory. He walked in the confidence of one who knew his path, and it was this self-assured stride that carried him to the same clearing, where he would find more than just a solitary elf. Peony's arrival was less straightforward. The tiefling succubus had been moving through the kingdoms, her motivations as enigmatic as her mischievous smile. Whether it was courtesy, boredom, or something deeper that guided her, even if she wasn't certain. But she had heard whispers of a place called Lockhaven, a small kingdom where the people were simple and the pleasures were many. It was enough to pique her interest, and so she had set off, her journey punctuated by flirtations and indulgence that left a trail of bewildered admirers in her wake. The woods were not her usual haunt, but they offered a path that was both intriguing and direct, straight to Lockhaven, where she had hoped to find entertainment and perhaps a bit of chaos. It was by chance, or perhaps some unseen force, that these three paths converged in the depths of the forest. Kronos had sensed the presence of others before he saw them, his keen senses alerting him to their approach. Dracon had heard the soft sounds of movement, assuming it to be some wild creature before seeing the elf's calm figure. And Peony, drawn by the prospect of company, had allowed herself to stumble upon the scene with all the flair she could muster. Each had been heading towards Lockhaven for their own reasons, their paths crossing the woods at just the right moment. Though none of them had planned to travel with others, the realization that they were all heading in the same direction, towards the same destination, had prompted an unspoken agreement to stick together, at least for the time being. Kronos had recognized the value in numbers, especially with the shifting energies he had felt in the forest. Dracon, though loath to admit it, appreciated the company, especially if it meant more opportunities to show off. And Peony? She saw the potential for amusement and trouble, both of which she never shied away from. So they had continued together, the quiet woods offering a temporary stage for the beginning of what would become an unlikely, if not betruding, alliance. The clearing where they met was merely the start of a journey that had already begun long before they had crossed paths. In the heart of the ancient woodlands, there were the shadows of trees stretched long under the facing light of dusk. Three paths converged. The air hummed with the songs of distant creatures, and a faint breeze carried the scent of earth and pine. It was here, in this sacred, untamed place that fate brought together 3 unlikely souls. Kronos, the 11 Ranger, moved through the forest with the grace of one who had known it for centuries. His silver hair fell loosely over his shoulders, and his sharp green eyes were ever watchful, catching the smallest flicker of movement. He was as much a part of the woods as the trees themselves, his presence almost impeccable, save for the soft rustle of leaves beneath his boots. He paused at the edge of the clearing, sensing a shift in the air, a sign that he was no longer alone. From the opposite side of the clearing, a towering figure emerged, his scales glistening in the dying light. Drakon, the dragonborn warrior, stood with a posture that commanded attention. His crimson scales caught the sun's last rays, casting a fiery glow around him. A huff of smoke escaped his nostrils as he surveyed the area, his golden eyes narrowing in suspicion. He strode forward, each step heavy with purpose, the ground trembling slightly under his weight. In his mind, there was no doubt he was the strongest, the fiercest, the mightiest to ever walk these woods. And then, with a burst of inappropriate laughter that shattered the forest's serene silence, Petey made her entrance. The tiefling succubus sauntered into the clearing, her hips swaying with exaggerated femininity, her violet skin glowing against the twilight. She flickered a lock of her dark, curly hair over her shoulder and licked her lips, her crimson eyes gleaming with mischief. Dressed in a tight leather that left little to the imagination, Petey was the embodiment of playful chaos. She cast a sly glance at her new companions, her voice dripping with innuendo as she purred, "Well, well, aren't I lucky? 2 strong, handsome men all to myself in the middle of nowhere." Drakon snorted, crossing his arms over his broad chest, his ego bruised by her teasing tone. "You do well to keep your distance, succubus," he growled, his voice a deep rumble. "You're in the presence of the strongest warrior these woods have ever seen." Kronos merely raised an eyebrow, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips as he watched the 2 bicker. He could already tell this unlikely trio would be anything but dull. With a sigh of resignation and a twinkle of amusement in his eyes, he stepped forward, ready to begin whatever journey the fates had woven for them. "Perhaps," he said calmly, "we should focus on surviving the night first. The woods have a way of testing those who think too highly of themselves." His gaze shifted meaningly towards Drakon, who grunted in response. Petey giggled, sliding up to Kronos with a wink. "Oh, I like him," she purred. "So serious. So tempting." And so, under the darkening sky, with the stars beginning to peek through the canopy, the 3 unlikely companions found themselves bound by the threads of destiny. Whatever challenges awaited them in the depths of the forest, one thing was certain: this was only the beginning. Welcome to Lockhaven. The forest path twisted and turned beneath the ancient bayous, and narrow trail of packed earth and roots leading the trio towards their destination. The sounds of the woods, a distant owl's hoot, the rustling of unseen creatures in the underbrush, filled the silence between them. The 3 walked in a loose formation, the gap between them both a sign of their unfamiliarity and the unspoken tension that had already begun to simmer. Kronos, ever mindful of his surroundings, took the lead. His steps were light, barely disturbing the ground as he moved with the practiced ease of someone who had long learned to blend with the wilderness. He glanced back occasionally, his gaze flickering between the companions as if to gauge their readiness. The forest was no place for complacency, even on well-trodden paths. "Lockhaven isn't far," he remarked softly, more to himself than the others. "We should reach it before the moon is high." Behind him, Drakon stomped forward, his heavy boots crunching the forest floor with every step. He carried himself with the air of someone who believed he could take on the entire world, and win. His chest puffed out, his tail swished with every step, and his eyes were fixed ahead, as if daring the trees themselves to challenge him. "A small kingdom like Lockhaven will be nothing but a brief stop for me," Draken declared, his voice resonating through the trees. "But perhaps it's the best you two stay close. I'll make sure no one tries anything foolish." He cracked his knuckles for emphasis, a smirk playing on his lips. Kronos, keeping his eyes on the path ahead, replied in his usual calm tone. "I'm sure Lockhaven will tremble at your approach, Drakon, but it might be wiser to save your strength for the road ahead. There's no telling what might encounter between here and the gates." Petey trailed behind, her hips swaying in a slow, deliberate rhythm as she took her time, seemingly unconcerned with the pace of their destination. She caught up to Drakon, sliding up close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. "Oh, don't be so serious, big guy," she purred, her voice laced with a mock concern. "All work and no play makes a Dragonborn so tense." She let her fingers dance lightly across his arm, her touch deliberately teasing. "You can learn to relax a bit. Enjoy the journey." Draken's eyes narrowed as she looked down at her, a mix of irritation and confusion crossing his features. "I don't need your games, succubus," he rumbled, shrugging off her touch. "Save your tricks for someone else. I'm focused on what matters, like making sure we aren't ambushed by any creatures foolish enough to cross our paths." Petey rolled her eyes and let out an exaggerated sigh. "Such a waste," she murmured, but her tone was light, her mischief unbothered. She danced ahead of Drakon, slipping past Kronos with a wink, as if as much to challenge it was flirtation. "What about you, Kronos? Are you always this composed? Are you ever let loose? Perhaps Lockhaven has a little tavern where we can all relax." Kronos, unfazed by her insinuation, merely gave her a sidelong glance, the hint of the smile touching his lips. "I'm content with the journey as it is," he replied, his voice steady, "but I'm sure Lockhaven will have plenty to offer someone with your tastes." He didn't rise to her bait, his calm demeanor unshaken. Petey's playful antics were no match for the elf's serenity. Petey laughed, a sound that both amused and slightly frustrated. "You're no fun, Kronos," she teased, though there was a note of genuine curiosity in her voice. "What makes you tick? What gets that heart of yours racing?" Kronos met her gaze, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Perhaps that's a mystery you'll have to unravel, Petey," he said, his tone carrying a gentle challenge. The succubus pouted playfully, though her mind was already working, plotting her next move. "Oh, I do love a good mystery," she purred, before skipping ahead, leaving the two men behind. Drakon watched her go, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "She's trouble," he murmured, more to himself than Kronos. "Mark my words." Kronos, still calm, replied without missing a beat. "Trouble, yes, but also our ally, at least for now. We'll need to trust each other if we reach Lockhaven unscathed." He paused, then added with a touch of dry humor, "Besides, I think you can handle a little trouble, Drakon." Drakon grunted, unsure if the elf was mocking him or offering genuine praise. "Of course I can handle her," he said, puffing out his chest once more. "There's nothing I can't handle." Kronos simply nodded, his expression unreadable as he continued leading the way. As the evening deepened, the trees began to thin, revealing the first distant lights of Lockhaven flickering through the foliage. The kingdom was close now, its walls rising just beyond the next hill. The trio's journey was far from over, but already the dynamic between them was taking shape, a volatile mix of ego, charm, and quiet wisdom. Whatever awaited them in Lockhaven, one thing was clear. This unlikely group was bound to leave their mark, for better or worse. As the trio neared the gates of Lockhaven, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the small kingdom in soft glow of twilight. The stone walls of the town stood sturdy and well kept, a testament to the instructedness of its people. Warm lights flickered in the windows of the buildings, promising the comfort of food and drink after a long journey. The entrance to the town was guarded by a pair of stern-faced soldiers, clad in polished armor, their spears crossed in front of them. Kronos, ever mindful, approached first, his demeanor calm and respectful. "We seek entry to Lockhaven for the night," he said, his voice steady and soothing. The guards looked him over, then shifted their attention to Dracon, their eyes widening slightly at the sight of the Dragonborn's imposing figure. Dracon, basking in the attention, squared his shoulders and gave the guards a confident smirk. "We won't be any trouble," he declared, his voice booming. "But if there is any trouble, you can rest assured I'll handle it." He flexed his muscles as if to unscore his point, and the guards exchanged a glance, one that held both awe and unease. Then their eyes fell on Petey, who had been lingering behind. Their expression changed. The jollity drained from their faces, replaced by suspicion and distaste. One of the guards, a grizzled veteran with a scar running down his cheek, took a step forward, his grip tightening to his spear. "What's your business here, tiefling?" he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "Lockhaven doesn't take kindly to your kind." Petey's usual playful smile faltered, replaced with a look of cold annoyance. She crossed her arms over her chest, her tail flickering with irritation. "I'm with them," she said, nodding towards Kronos and Dracon. "We're just passing through." The guard sneered. "We don't need your kind passing through. You best turn around and find somewhere else to keep sleep tonight. We don't want your tricks and temptations here." Dracon's eyes narrowed, his anger flaring at the guard's disrespectful tone. "Watch your tongue, human," he growled, stepping forward so that he loomed over the guard. "She's with me, and I don't take kindly to anyone treating my companions like dirt." The guard's sneer turned into a scowl, but before he could respond, his fellow guard raised a hand, signaling him to stand down. "Easy, Jordan," the guard said, his tone more measured. "They've done nothing wrong yet. Let them through, but keep an eye on the tiefling. If there's any trouble, we'll deal with it." With a grunting nod, the first guard stepped aside, but not without giving Petey one last look of disgust. Petey held his gaze, her lips curling to a smile that was more predatory than flirtatious. "Thanks for the warm welcome," she said sweetly, though the venom in her tone was unmistakable. As the trio passed through the gates and into town, Dracon's temper still simmered. The nerve of those fools! "The nerve of those fools," he muttered, the tail swishing with agitation. "Who do they think they are, talking to us like that? If it weren't for the fact that we need a place to rest, I'd teach them a lesson." Kronos, walking alongside him, placed a calming hand on Dragonborn's arm. "Let it go, Dracon. We're here now, and there's no need to start a fight where none is necessary." Dracon grunted, but didn't reply, his mood still sour. Petey, however, had recovered her usual demeanor. Through her eyes glinted with a hint of something darker. "Racism, darling," she said with a mock sigh. "It's the curse of having horns and a tail. You get used to it after a while." Her voice was light, but there was a bitterness beneath it that hadn't been there before. As they made their way towards the center of town, the sounds of merriment began to fill the air. A nearby tavern, its doors wide open, spilling laughter and music into the night. The sign above it read, "The Golden Griffin," and inside, the warmth of the firelight beckoned. Before they could enter, a group of soldiers emerged from the tavern, their laughter dying down as they noticed the newcomers. The tallest of them, a broad-shouldered man with a square jaw and piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. He was clad in fine armor, the signal of Lockhaven, embezzled on his chest, marking him as someone who had of high rank. His gaze swept over the trio, pausing on Dracon with a hint of challenge in his eyes. "You there," the man called out, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "You're a Dragonborn, aren't you? A rare sight in these parts. What brings you to Lockhaven?" Dracon, never one to shy away from attention, straightened his posture and met the man's gaze with equal intensity. "Just passing through," he said, his tone casual but laced with pride. "We've come for a rest and supplies before continuing on our journey." The man's eyes flickered with something, perhaps amusement, perhaps interest. "I see. And tell me, Dragonborn, do you fancy yourself a warrior?" Dracon swelled chest with pride. I don't fancy myself one, he declared, his voice rising. I am one. The best there is. The man's lips curled into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Is that so? Well, Lockhaven has its own share of fine warriors. Perhaps you care to put your claim to the test? The challenge was clear, and Dracon's blood heated with the thrill of competition. Name the time and place, he said, with a low growl. I'm not one to back down from a fight. The man nodded, pleased with the response. Tomorrow, at dawn, in the training grounds, just outside the northern gate. I am Captain Valen, and I'll be your opponent. Let's see if you live up to your own reputation. With that, Captain Valen turned and walked away, his shoulders following close behind. Dracon watched him go, his fists clenched in anticipation. Finally, a real challenge, he muttered, a fierce grin spreading across his face. I'll show him what a true warrior looks like. Kronos sighed quietly, shaking his head. Try not to get yourself killed, Dracon, he said with a hint of resignation. We still have a long journey ahead of us. Petey, meanwhile, was watching Dracon with a mixture of amusement and concern. Just be careful, big guy, she said, her voice softer than before. I'd hate for you to get hurt before you even had a chance to have some fun. Dracon gave her a confident smirk, his ego fully engaged. Don't worry about me, Petey. This Valen won't know what hit him. As they finally stepped into the Golden Griffin and settled down for the night, they waited the day's events hung over them. Conflict had already begun to test their bonds, and the challenge ahead promised to be even greater. But for now, they had a warm fire, a meal, and the promise of a bed. Though, for Dracon, tomorrow's dawn couldn't come soon enough. The trio parted ways after securing a few rooms at the Golden Griffin, each drawn by their own interests within Lockhaven. The town, despite its size, seemed to buzz with an undercurrent of secrets, something that the three felt in their own way. Kronos moved through the town with quiet purpose, his sharp eyes taking in the small details that others might overlook, the subtle way people glanced over their shoulders, the hushed whispers exchanged at street corners. He had always been attuned to the subtleness of his surroundings, and Lockhaven, with its picturesque charm, was no exception. Yet something about the town felt off. It was as if a veil of normalcy had been pulled over something much darker. His feet carried him down a narrow cobblestone street that led to a small, unassuming building tucked between two larger ones. A faded sign above the door read, Lockhaven Archives, though it was more commonly known as the town's library. Drawn by a hunch, Kronos entered, the bell above the door tingling softly as he stepped aside. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and dust. The dim light barely reached its far corners of the room, where rows of ancient tomes lined themselves. As Kronos moved deeper into the library, his eyes lined with the shelves. As Kronos moved deeper into the library, his eyes scanned the titles, searching for anything that might explain the unease he felt. Can I help you, traveler? The whisper was soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried the weight that made Kronos turn sharply. A figure emerged from the shadows, an elderly man, stooped and thin, with eyes that gleamed too brightly for someone his age. His robes were worn and threadbare. They were clung to him like they belonged there, as if he had always been a part of the musty, forgotten atmosphere of the library. Kronos studied the man for a moment, sensing that there was more to him than met the eye. I'm looking for information, he said carefully. Something about this town feels unusual. I was hoping to find some answers here. The old man's eyes twinkled, and a knowing smile crept into his face. Oh, there's much to be learned within these walls, though not all knowledge is easy to find. He turned slowly, mentioning for Kronos to follow. Come, there's something I think you should see. Kronos followed the librarian deeper into the library, past shelves that grew dustier and more neglected the further they went. Finally, they reached a small hidden alcove where a single thick tome sat on a pedestal. The book was ancient, its cover cracked and faded, but resonated a strange energy. The librarian gestured to the book. This is the Chronicles of the Forgotten, a record of the best left unspoken. Few know of its existence. A fewer still can decipher its secrets. Chronos stepped closer, feeling the weight of the moment. What's in it? Stories of the town's past, things that were hidden, the librarian whispered, his voice dripping to a conspiratorial tone. The kind of history that doesn't make it to the official records. But be warned, Ranger. Knowledge is a double-edged sword. What you find here may not be what you expect. Kronos nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He reached out to the open book, his fingers brushing against the rough leather cover. As the pages turned, he felt a surge of something, perhaps curiosity, perhaps dread, building within him. Whatever secrets Lockhaven held, he was determined to uncover them. Meanwhile, Petey had found her way to one of Lockhaven's more lively establishments, a ramshackle pub called the Laughing Rat. The name was fitting, she thought with a smirk, as she pushed open the door and was greeted by the sound of laughter, clinking mugs, and the smell of spilled ale. The place was packed, the air thick with the scent of sweat and revelry. Petey moved through the crowd with ease, her presence drawing attention as she swayed her hips and flashed chasing smiles at the patrons. She revealed in the stares, the whispered comments, the way men and a few women followed her with their eyes. Finding an empty spot at the bar, she leaned against the counter, her tail curling around the stool as she ordered a drink. Before long, a group of locals slided up to her, their expression a mix of curiosity and desire. "Haven't seen you around before," one of them, a burly man with a thick beard, said as he leaned a bit too close. "What brings a pretty thing like you to our little town?" Petey batted her eyelashes, playing the part. "Oh, just passing through," she said with a coy smile. "Thought I'd see what kind of fun Lockhaven has to offer." The men chuckled, enhancing glances. "You've come to the right place, then," another one said, sliding into her waist. "We know how to show a lady a good time." Petey let out a playful laugh, her eyes glimmering with mischief. "I'm sure you do," she purred, but there was an edge to her voice that they either didn't notice or chose to ignore. Things escalated quickly. The men's advances became bolder, their touches more possessive, until one of them crossed the line. He grabbed her tail, pulling her closer, a smug grin on his face as he won some sort of prize. Petey's eyes flashed dangerously. "That," she said, her voice suddenly cold, "was a mistake." With a swift movement, she twisted it out of his grasp, her fist connecting with his jaw in a move that sent him sprawling backward into a table, unpending drinks and plates. The pub fell silent for a moment, the other patrons watching in stunned belief as the man struggled to his feet, wiping blood from his lip. The silence didn't last long. A chorus of cheers erupted from the crowd, some egging the man on, others shouting encouragement to Petey. The burly man she punched growled in anger, charging out with fists raised. But Petey was ready. She danced out of his reach, her moves fluid and precise, delivering a series of swift strikes and left them dazed and staggering. The other men hesitated, unsure whether to join in the fray or back down, but their hesitation was enough. With a wicked grin, Petey spun on her heel and kicked the second man in the chest, sending him crashing into the bar. The fight devolved into chaos, the chairs and tables being overturned as the brawl spread through the pub. Petey, for her part, was having the time of her life, her laughter ringing out above the din as he dodged and struck, her succubus nature giving her an edge over her opponents. She could feel the energy of the room feeding her, the thrill of the fight fueling her already considerable strength. As she knocked the other would-be attacker to the floor, she couldn't help but think that Lockhaven was proving to be far more entertaining than she had anticipated. While Kronos and Petey were immersed in their own pursuits, Dracon made his way to the northern gate, where the training grounds lay just outside the walls. The anticipation of the duel had kept him awake for most of the night, his mind racing with thoughts of victory. This would be another notch in his belt, another story to tell of his unmatched strength and skill. The morning air was crisp as Dracon stepped into the training grounds, the area already bustling with soldiers and townsfolk eager to witness the match. Captain Valen was waiting for him, standing tall and confident in the center of the field. His armor gleamed in the morning light, and he held a long sword with ease that spoke of years of experience. Valen smiled at Dracon and approached, his eyes narrowing in a challenge. "I'm glad you showed up," he said, his voice carrying across the field. "I was worried you might have lost your nerve." Dracon snorted, rolling his shoulders as flexed his claws. "You should worry about yourself, Captain. I won't go easy on you." The crowd murmured in excitement as the two combatants squared off. Valen raised his sword, assuming a defensive stance, while Dracon crouched low, his eyes locked on his opponent. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the promise of violence. The signal was given. The duel began. Dracon moved first, his powerful legs propelling him forward in a burst of speed. He swung his claws at Valen, aiming for the captain's exposed side, but Valen was quick, bringing his sword to deflect the blow with a metallic clang. The force of the impact reverberated through the air, and the crowd gasped as the two warriors clashed, each testing the other's strength. For a moment, it seemed like the match might be evenly matched. Valen moved with the precision of a seasoned warrior, his strikes quick and deliberate, while Dracon countered with a raw power and aggression. But as the fight wore on, Dracon began to notice something strange. Valen wasn't slowing down. Despite the ferocity in Dracon's attacks, Valen seemed to grow stronger, his movements more fluid, and his strikes more powerful with each passing moment. It was as if he was drawing energy from some hidden source, his stamina seemingly limitless. Dracon growled in frustration, launching another barrage of attacks, but Valen dodged. Dracon's claws slashed through the air, each strike given by the frustration and gnawed at him. Captain Valen's seemingly effortless parries and counters slowly fueled his anger. Dracon could feel his muscles burning, his breath becoming in ragged gasps, but Valen showed no signs of fatigue. Instead, the captain's movements grew sharper, his strikes more precise, as if he were feeding off Dracon's wanting energy. The crowd around them roared, caught up by the intensity of the duel. They saw that the only spectacle, the dragonborn warrior, was the town's revered captain locked in fierce combat, but Dracon's sharp eyes noticed something else, something that made his scales prick with suspicion. Valen's eyes had a strange gleam to them, one that seemed unnatural. His skin, flushed with the exertion of battle, held a sheen that didn't quite belong, and the way he moved, almost too fast, too strong, set off alarm bells in Dracon's mind. With a roar, Dracon lunged forward, swinging his tail in a wide arc to knock Valen off balance. But Valen sidestepped with an inhuman speed, bringing his sword down in a vicious arc that Dracon barely deflected with a desperate upward slash of his claws. The impact sent a shock wave through Dracon's arm, nearly numbing it. The captain's smile was thin, predatory line. "Is this the best you've got, Dragonborn?" Valen taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. "I expected more from someone who claims to be the strongest." Dracon snarled, his pride stinging. He charged again, this time faking a stride to the left before pivoting it to the right, aiming a vicious swipe at Valen's midsection. For a moment, he thought he'd caught the captain off guard, but Valen moved with supernatural agility, twisting away from the blow, that countering with a slash that caught Dracon across the chest. The wound wasn't deep, but it was enough to send Dracon staggering back, blood seeping between his scales. He gritted his teeth against the pain, refusing to give Valen the satisfaction of seeing him falter. But as he watched Valen circle him, something clicked in Dracon's mind. He caught a brief glimpse of a small vial hidden between Valen's armor, the faint glow of its contents flickering like liquid fire. The realization struck him like a thunderbolt. Valen was using potions, enhancing his strength and speed beyond what was natural. Fury and rage through Dracon, but it came with a cold clarity. Valen was cheating, relying on alchemical concoctions to maintain his reputation as the strongest warrior in Lockhaven. The thought of being bested by such a fraud only fueled Dracon's resolve, and he knew he couldn't win this fight through sheer force alone. He had to outthink the captain. Feigning a weariness, Dracon let his shoulders droop, his breath coming in heavy pants. He staggered back, allowing Valen to think he had upper hand. The captain's eyes gleamed with triumph as he advanced, ready to deliver the finishing blow. As Valen closed in, Dracon suddenly dropped to one knee, lowering his head as if in defeat. But as Valen raised his sword, Dracon lashed out a swift upward strike, his claws tearing through the leather straps that secured to the vials of Valen's side. The small glass bottles shattered against the ground, their contents spilling out and hissing as they touched the earth. Valen's eyes widened in shock. As for the first time in the duel, he hesitated. Dracon seized the moment, launching himself as the captain with renewed vigor. He lanced a powerful blow to Valen's side, sending the man crashing to the ground, his sword clattering away. The crowd gasped, the sudden turn of events catching them off guard. The Dracon knew the fight was far from over. He could see the desperation in Valen's eyes as the effects of the potions began to wear off, the strength draining from his limbs. But Valen wasn't finished. With a snarl, he pulled the hidden dagger from his boot and slashed at Dracon's leg, forcing the Dragonborn to retreat with a roar of pain. Valen scrambled. He scrambled to his feet, but without the potions, his movements were sluggish, his balance off. Dracon could have finished them then, could have delivered the final blow that would have ended the duel in his favor, but instead he stepped back, letting Valen stagger to his feet. "This duel is over," Dragon declared, his voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You're no warrior, Valen. You're a fraud who relies on potions to win your battles." The crowd murmured in confusion, but Dracon didn't give Valen a chance to protest. He reached down and picked up one of the broken vials, holding it for all to see. "These are your real weapons, Valen. Not your sword, not your skill. Just these potions. Without them, you're nothing." Valen's face twisted in rage and fear. He lunged at Dracon, but Dragonborn easily sidestepped his clumsy attack, sending the captain sprawling to the ground once more. The crowd was no longer cheering. Instead, they were whispering amongst themselves, the truth dawning on them. Dracon turned his back on the fallen captain, ignoring the jeers and insults that followed. He had no interest in finishing Valen off. Exposing him for what he was had been the victory enough, but he has walked away. A bitter taste lingered in his mouth. It wasn't the fight that he wanted, the glorious battle he had imagined. It was just another reminder that not all battles were fought on even ground. Not all victories were worth celebrating. As Dracon made his way back to the Golden Griffin, his mind racing with thoughts of what had just transpired, he spotted Kronos standing outside the library, his expression troubled. The elf was clutching an ancient tome, the pages yellowed and brittle. "Kronos," Dragon called out, still nursing the wound on his chest. "You won't believe what I just found out about that so-called Captain Valen." Kronos glanced up. "I can imagine," he said, his voice calm but edged with something else. "But I've discovered something troubling as well. This town is not what it seems. There are secrets buried here. Dark ones." Before Dracon could ask for more details, the door to the Laughing Rat swung open with a loud bang, and Petey emerged, a satisfying grin on her face, though she was sporting a fresh bruise on her cheek. "Well, that was fun," she said, her tail flicking playfully. "I see the locals are more than lively than I expected." Kronos looked at her, a hint of concern in his eyes. "I'm not surprised. Lockhaven has a lot more going on beneath its surface than we realized. I found some records in the library. Old stories about this town, about strange happenings that the townsfolk seem to have forgotten, or are pretending to forget." Petey's grin faded slightly as she caught the serious tone in Kronos' voice. "What kind of strange happenings?" "Disappearances, rituals, people acting out of character, and something about a powerful relic hidden somewhere in the town," Kronos explained. "I think whatever is going on here is tied to that relic." Dracon frowned, his earlier anger giving way to the growing sense of unease. "You think Valen is involved in this?" "It's possible," Kronos replied, "or he might just be another pawn, like the others, but we need to find out more." Peeta leaned against the wall, her playful demeanor tempered by the gravity of the situation. "Sounds like we've got ourselves a little mystery to solve. I say we play Valen another visit, see if he knows anything more than he's letting on." Dracon nodded, his hand tightening around the hilt of his sword. "And if he doesn't cooperate, we'll make him talk. I'm done playing games." Kronos sighed, knowing that things were about to get even more complicated. Let's be careful. We don't know how deep this goes or who we can trust." With their purpose aligned, the trio prepared to confront Captain Valen once more. This time, they weren't just seeking a fight. They were seeking the truth. And they moved forward through the dimly lit secrets of Lockhaven, and they couldn't shake the feeling that the town was watching them, its secrets waiting to be unraveled.